So it's 71 in here. Before it was like 65.
No, it's present.
It's nice. I'm surprised they don't have the coffee in here yet. So.
She just walked in.
What? Oh, he's bringing it? Oh, yeah. Good morning. We were waiting for you. Everybody said, we gotta have coffee. I like your hat. You look so cute, isn't it?
It's cold.
It is cold. You know, I sent Patrick an email. I said, you know, you gotta make it warmer in here. We got senior citizens that are cold all
No
the time.
passengers today.
Yeah, Janice is in the rest of the room. Yeah. Is that a nice holiday?
Yeah, how is it? I'm wondering, I'm supposed to go visit someone tomorrow in South LA.
Oh,
And I
no.
don't know if I should.
I don't think you better reschedule it because
And
it's
they're
gonna
talking thunderstorms here at 1 o'clock.
yeah, it's gonna be bad.
Hi, Diesel. How are you?
So Rabbi, I don't know how many people will show up in this weather.
Yeah.
We have a good group here. We have an interesting group.
Jeff.
And we're gonna, finish way too late. Look who's here, Cecil. Cecil, back. You're back, but you returned.
Oh, I'm back.
You're back here. Okay.
No, it's me. I thought
No,
you were talking
that's
about
okay.
my.
Actually, that's what Rabbi Schuldenkreis talk about communication. What we said, and how people interpret what we say.
Communication is very important.
Well, it is, if people understand. Well, then I can't talk, I can't comment. But he says it this morning, when he was reporting on. Nobody hears what he has to say.
Next week is going to be challenging. Next Wednesday, there's a big way to comment. So that's going to be a challenge.
That's something you need to learn, cause these problems.
But as I was telling friends, I know it rains overnight.
Oh, yeah. Get around it.
Okay. Are we ready to go? We are the few and the proud. And the brave, yes. Yeah, it's wet out there. It's going to get a lot wetter in the next day, later and today and tomorrow.
And next week is going to be also very, Wednesday, Thursday next week.
I'm glad we're getting rain. We need it. So all of our Mashiva Ruach, Morid Haga Hashem is starting to work. So, good. Okay. Today we're going to start the bees. The bees. And so the first place we're going to today, I'm going to do two today, two because they're two smaller ones. The first place we're going to today is Barbados. I bet it is too. Anybody know where Barbados is? Yes. Okay. Okay. If you know what, let me. If I need a better scale than that. Okay. There's North America. And here is South America. Okay, there's Central America. So here in the Caribbean, you have a whole group of islands. And Barbados is basically there on the very, very eastern part. Okay, here we have Brazil. This is all going to be important in a minute. Here is French Guiana. Come on, you, Mark. There we go. And here is Bolivia, because we're going there next. Bolivia isn't on the coast, though, so it's like here. No, because you got Chile there. So Okay. So today we're going to Barbados. So, the first Jews who come to Barbados come from basically Spain, following the expulsion of the Jews in 1492 by the Alhambra Decree. So the Alhambra Decree, March 31st, 1492, is the decree that Ferdinand and Isabella institute in order to expel the Jews. And, you know, we've talked about it a couple of times. I just want to make sure that we all remember that Jews are expelled because they're heretics. The Inquisition doesn't go after Jews. They're already heretics. We don't want them. The Inquisition goes after conversos because the conversos claim to be Christian, and the Inquisition wants to make sure that they are in fact Christian, that they really did convert and not just pretend to convert. So the Jews were already, they're gone. They were not wanted anymore. And Barbados, starting in 1625, is an English colony, a British colony. All right. So the Sephardic Jews who are fleeing Spain and then later Portugal go first to Brazil because there is a very large colony of Jews in Brazil on the coast here in a city called Recife. And Recife has a very large Jewish population. And in fact, it is from Recife that we get the first Jews to the United States. Yes, a lot of Portuguese Jews. And some Spanish as well. But the problem in 1492, when this happens, Recife is a Dutch colony. It's not a Portuguese colony. Recife is Dutch. However, it's captured by the Portuguese in 1654. So you have 1492 to 1654, it's a Dutch colony, and Sephardic Jews from both Spain and Portugal go to Recife because there's a large Jewish community there. Okay. But
the Jews of Holland, are they descendants of the Brazilian Jews that went to Holland at that time, or there were Jews in Holland before the arrival of the new Jews?
oh, there were definitely Jews in Holland before that time. And you have the largest influx of Jews to Holland from Spain and Portugal. Is that what you were asking me? Oh, okay. So what happens, you'll recall, what happens is that, so you have Spain and Portugal, and then to the east of Spain and Portugal, right, we have France and we have Holland in there. The Netherlands is in there. All right, so those Jews who were expelled from Spain and Portugal either go south or they go east. And there are a lot of Jews who end up going to Holland. In fact, Amsterdam was called the New Jerusalem at one point because there were so many conversos who went to Holland. And it caused a huge problem in Holland because these conversos who came knew nothing about being Jewish. They were already removed by years from Jewish practice. They knew their ancestry was Jewish, but they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to light Shabbat candles. They didn't know prayers. They didn't know what a Seder was, all kinds of things. And so the Jewish community, the established Jewish community of Amsterdam, was very embarrassed by these people and annoyed. It's like, oh God, we got to teach them how to be Jewish. Really? Oh, And so it was a problem. And of course, out of this mass migration into Amsterdam, it is the generation that that ultimately produces Spinoza and others. So we have that migration to Holland, absolutely, Cecil, yes. And then we have the migration to South America and to around Africa and into the Middle East as well, what we now call the Middle East. So in 1654, the Portuguese move into Brazil, and they bring the Inquisition into Brazil. And so you can imagine that at this point, many Jews from Recife get the heck out. Where do they go? Well, some go to French Guiana in 1664, and some go to Suriname. So once these colonies are established there, the problem then becomes that because they are also under Portuguese rule and French rule in French Guiana, that the Jews were forced to leave. And so Jews leave where they had been, French Guiana, and they go to Barbados. And then the Jews from Suriname go to Barbados. And Suriname is a Dutch colony as well, and that's going to become important in a moment.
Just want to point out that many of the Jews living in Spain at that time wound up in the Ottoman Empire in Turkey.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So Zisel says many of the Jews who lived in Spain at that time end up in the Ottoman Empire. For sure. Absolutely true. And that's where we got Ladino in the Sephardic community. 100% correct.
I have a question regarding Suriname and French Guiana. They were under the tutelage of the Inquisition, so why did they leave? Why did they leave those colonies?
In French Guiana in 65, in the capital, Cayenne, like cayenne pepper, Cayenne, the Jewish community, the settlement there was dissolved. In other words, it was, it was what? Dissipated, but they were forced out.
So they were wanted.
Correct.
Gentlemen, may I ask that you use the microphone? There are so many people not here, so I think we have another mic. So
I'm trying to repeat everything though, but,
it's so hard for you.
all right, I'll try harder. It's okay. Because it's just too hard to pass the microphone. It's just too hard. So some move from French Guiana, and the others come from Suriname, because Suriname surrenders to the Dutch in 1674. And the Jews from Suriname, many were deported to Jamaica, but some went to Barbados. Yes?
What or where is Suriname?
It's right next to French Guiana.
It's right next to French Guiana, yes. Thank you. Yeah. Then there was a British Guiana as well. Very good. Okay. So now we have this Jewish community in Barbados. And they have come from a number of different places. And they establish a synagogue called Nidhe Israel. And that is the sort of the synagogue of Barbados. Nidhe Israel means the synagogue of the scattered of Israel. Makes good sense. They're coming from all different places, and they're ending up in Barbados. And that is established in Bridgetown, which is the capital. Bridgetown, the island of Barbados. Bridgetown is here. And then there's another city just above it to the north where some Jews went, which was called Spacetown. S-P-E-G-H-T-S town. And so by this time, from the records that we have, there were about 54 Jews in Bridgetown out of a population of 404. So that's not bad. That's a lot of Jews, actually, out of 404. Okay.
What year was that?
This is in the late 1600s. And so the question then becomes, so what did Jews do when they got there? Well, it turns out they worked mostly in sugar and coffee cultivation. There were some plantation owners in Suriname, but there weren't plantations for Jews in Barbados. But they did work in the sugar and coffee industry, and they were very instrumental in making Barbados a major producer of sugar at that time. And, of course, Jews being very ingenious and business-minded and everything, some Jews became wealthy in the sugar and coffee industries. However, the British government accused the Jews of trading more frequently with the Dutch than with them. Now, on the one hand, we can sort of understand, I mean, they came from Suriname, which ended up being a Dutch colony, and Recife had been a Dutch colony, and so there was a strong connection to the Dutch already, and the British were annoyed by that. They wanted exclusive rights for trading for themselves. So by 1661, there was a request by some of the prominent Jewish merchants to start trading with Suriname. And the request was granted, but the British were annoyed by it. And as we said, there were Jewish businessmen then who became very wealthy. By 1679, so by the late 1600s, so we had 54 Jews earlier. By the late 1600s, we had almost 300 in Barbados. So, because the Jewish community was prospering and everything was going well, more people were coming in. However, just before this beautiful enlargement of the Jewish population there, the Jews were banned from all trade in 1668, all trade, from employing Christians. They were only allowed to have one male slave, and they were forced into a ghetto in Bridgetown. So the Jewish community was doing fairly well. However, there were a number of restrictions that were placed on this, and this is in the late 1600s. And it stayed pretty much the same for a while. By the 18th century, which is the 1700s, right? So just after this period, the Jewish population continues to grow slowly and continues to be successful. Now, what was kind of weird for me is, as I was researching this, there were a number of articles that said the Jewish community at this time prospered and became successful. And I'm thinking to myself, how did they become successful? They were banned from all trade. They could only own one slave. I mean, if they were working in sugar and coffee, then perhaps, my best guess, because I couldn't find it anywhere, my best guess is that they produced the sugar and coffee, they grew it, and then probably sold it to another merchant who then traded it. And so probably they got a good price for their sugar and their coffee when they sold it to local merchants who then traded because they weren't allowed to trade themselves. Cecil.
Well, maybe they also may have engaged in banking. That's how banking started. In Europe, the non-Jewish community, the people around didn't want to handle money, so they gave it to the Jews, and the Jews became bankers.
Right. So Cecil says maybe they also prospered in the field of finance and business and money lending as they had in Europe. I didn't find any evidence of that at all. It doesn't seem to have been the case. I think they would have probably mentioned it, and it would have stood out that Jews were, prosperous in the financial industries. But I didn't see any of that there.
So Rabbi,
Yes,
coffee growing and
sugar.
sugar growing requires manual labor, so who was doing that?
So good question. So Rosa asked, coffee production and sugar production requires labor. How was that happening? Again, they could only own one male slave.
They contracted it, probably.
Perhaps. I could not find any. I looked all over. You think children? Yeah, that's true. It's interesting that, Janice, that you say that, because they were only allowed one male slave. Didn't say anything about women. So perhaps, Janice, that's a very good point. Maybe there were women involved. I'll keep looking to try to get some more information on it, but I couldn't find anything. Yes?
In the growing of the sugar cane, you need a huge labor force to cut the sugar cane.
Sure.
And during that time of the season of cutting, you have to give employment to a lot of people.
Yes. Cecil says that the production of sugar is very labor intensive, and it requires a lot of people to do that. So,
In fact, my father, when he came from Eastern Europe to Cuba, one of his very first jobs was young and strong, was cutting sugar cane in the fields. And then that gave him enough money to buy a horse and become a merchant.
and this was who?
My father,
Your father worked in sugar plantations in Cuba.
in the 20s, early 20s,
Uh-huh.
and, he only had he was strong.
Right.
He found a job in the sugar cane.
Very good. So the one piece of important information is in 1802, all those discriminatory laws were reversed by the local Barbadian government, and then in 1820 by England. So what we had basically was 1668 to 1802, like 150 years approximately, that these laws were in effect, and then they were reversed, first locally and then officially by the British government. In 1831, there was a terrible, terrible hurricane. And the hurricane destroyed the synagogue, Nidhe Israel, basically, and it led ultimately to a decline in the Jewish community. I guess Jews felt that it was unsafe and started looking for another place to live. Yeah, yep, yep. And so by 1848, there was a decline in the Jewish community. And then between emigration, meaning moving out of Barbados, as opposed to immigration coming into Barbados, emigration moving out of Barbados and assimilation, it led to basically the Jewish community vanished by 1929. There was nothing left of a Jewish community. Nidhe, Israel, the synagogue fell into disrepair, obviously because it wasn't being used. And that continued all the way until, you can imagine, after World War II. After World War II, we know there were so many refugees, so many displaced persons. And so now you had an influx of Ashkenazi Jews from Eastern Europe. And they came to Barbados. By 1968, you didn't have a lot, but out of a total population of about 250,000, you had a very small Jewish community, 80 to 100 individuals. And this Jewish community worked to restore Nidhe, Israel. So there was the synagogue was rebuilt, restored, put back into use. And by 2008, the Nidhe Israel Museum opened. And what's really interesting, in the archaeological expeditions and when they were reviving the synagogue, and then afterwards into the 2000s when they were working around the yards, they found a 17th century mikveh. And I guess it was very interesting because the reports that I read said that the archaeologist who was there, who was digging, was excavating the area, and there were two Israeli tourists standing there, and he heard them say mikveh. And so then he went back very quickly and started researching and looking into it, and it, in fact, turned out to be a mikveh. So, and that would be very consistent, right? Because very consistent with the history as we know it, because as we talked about in our last class, the first things that you have to have when you establish a Jewish community are what? Cemetery and a mikveh. Absolutely. Absolutely. The ocean can be used as a mikveh. However, I think the community probably would have wanted a specifically designated mikveh for the community rather than the ocean. But the ocean absolutely can be used.
Doesn't the mikvah require a specific number of cubits in its design?
Yes, the mikveh has to have certain dimensions, and it has to have, I'm trying to think of the word, how to say it, free-flowing water. And so this mikveh was built on top of an old stream that they hadn't found yet. And when they were doing the excavations, they found the mikveh and they found the stream underneath it.
Did they ever find a cemetery?
They did not, as far as I know, they did not find a cemetery. So basically what we have in Barbados today is a very small Jewish community with one synagogue, and it continues. But it's mostly Ashkenazi Jews now, whereas in Barbados's beginning, it was all Sephardic Jews.
So you said a small community. What's the size of that?
Like 80 to 100. Yeah. What did I want to say? Okay. So the next place that we go on our tour today is Bolivia. And as we see, Bolivia is in South America on the western coast. It's not on the coast. It's just inside the coast. It's landlocked. It has no water. Okay. And the first Jews who get to Bolivia come from, where do you think? The Spanish Inquisition. And they flee from Portugal and Spain, and they come to Bolivia. But and apparently they worked in silver mines. That was their occupations. But it isn't until much later in history that we get any kind of larger population of Jews in Bolivia. Throughout the 19th century, Jewish merchants came and they took local women as their wives and ultimately, unfortunately, merged into the Catholic society. So they didn't continue their Judaism. Now, if these Jewish merchants were conversos, they probably were. I mean, I think we can understand it. It would not be unusual for them. They were probably at that point more comfortable with Christianity as well. They came, they took Bolivian wives, and they just merged into society. However, in 1905, so now we're in the 20th century, 1905, we have a lot of Russian Jews coming to Bolivia, and then Argentinian Jews coming to Bolivia. By 1917, there isn't a large population, 25, 30 Jews in Bolivia, but there is a very small community. And this happens throughout the early 1900s. By 1933, in the onset of World War II, again, there were only like 30, 40 Jewish families in Bolivia. In 1938, the La Paz Cemetery is consecrated, and there are also some attacks on Jewish businesses because of the rise of anti-Semitism. In the 1940s, the Jewish population begins to increase. For obvious reasons, Jews who are leaving, say again? Jews who are escaping and Jews who have relocated after the war. So we have a much larger Jewish population, almost 7,000, much larger in the by the 1940s. However, with all that immigration, you remember that in 1939, Britain institutes the White Paper, which restricts Jewish immigration to Palestine. In 1924, the United States had the Johnson-Reed Immigration Act, which restricted immigration here. Many countries followed suit with restrictive immigration laws, and in 1939, the immigration policies of Bolivia were modified as well to keep out anybody who was coming from a country that was ruled by one of the Axis powers. So clearly, all the Jews of Eastern Europe and all the Jews of Germany, they were restricted from coming into Bolivia. And in 1940, all Jewish visas were suspended. Also in 1940, during the 1940s, there was a large emigration from Bolivia. Where did those Jews go? Well, certainly in 1948, with the establishment of the State of Israel, Jews left to go to Israel. And some went to the United States as well, but there was a outflow of Jews from Bolivia. They also went to Argentina and the U.S. and Israel. All right. So the Jewish population of Bolivia declines. And by the later 1940s, it had gone from several thousand down to about 500. And there were synagogues in La Paz, in a city called Cochabamba, and Santa Cruz de la Sierra. There were 3 synagogues, the largest one being in La Paz. Yep. In 2009, the government broke ties with Israel, and they claimed that it was a terrorist and a genocidal state. So as of the early 2000s, the government didn't have anything to do with Israel. By 2015, so many of the young people in the Jewish community had left to attend universities in Argentina, Brazil, US, and Israel that the Jewish population declined even more. What was interesting, because when I read that, I started researching as well. It's like, how did they afford to go to universities? How did they afford to go to universities in the U.S. and Israel? I couldn't ultimately find the answer. But the only thing I could think of is that, you know, it's perhaps the ones that stayed were successful in agriculture, because it was primarily agriculture that the Jews were involved in Bolivia. Maybe they were successful in agriculture and successful enough that they could send their children to outside universities. No, the mining was during the colonial times. In the later years, Jews were involved in agriculture. Oh, that's a good thought. They also got government scholarships, possibly. But the problem was that the young people left to attend universities and did not come back. You can understand why, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. By 2019, we have a new government come in that replaces the one who had broken ties with Israel. And now the new government resumes ties with Israel, and the relations are now cordial. However, the population centers seem to have diminished so much, and the outflow of Jews has decimated the population so greatly that the estimates are that in the next 10 to 20 years, the Jewish population in Bolivia is going to vanish. An interesting note, La Paz is the highest capital in elevation in the world. And because the synagogue is in La Paz, the highest synagogue in the world is in Bolivia. That was kind of interesting. I would have never, that would have never occurred to me. Yes?
We have a member of our congregation, Manny Aftergut, who was born in Cochabamba, Bolivia. And his family was originally from Eastern Europe. I don't remember which country. And he was born in Bolivia, and when he was 9, which was in the 50s, they emigrated to the United States.
Wow. Wow. So Joette says there's a member of the congregation here, Manny Aftergut, who is from Bolivia, and he is of Russian Jewish descent. So probably his ancestors came over in that large Russian Jewish wave of immigration in the early 20th century.
Which part
Uh-huh. Okay. But that was the largest move of Russian and perhaps Eastern European Jews into Bolivia. Um,
I have a cousin from whom I have not heard because he doesn't want to have anything to do with our family.
oh,
But he moved to Bolivia. He got involved in textile, bringing textile, South American textiles to the U.S. And so I believe at this time he still lives there as a family. Whether they're involved in the Jewish community or
yeah.
not, I have no idea.
You have a cousin who moved to Bolivia and does some kind of trading of some kind, but you're not in touch with them.
1970s, I would say, 78, something like that. And, but as I said, I think I got a hold of his address and wrote him a letter, but never.
Got it. So La Paz is the highest capital and it has the highest synagogue in the world. So today in La Paz, they conduct minyan services on Mondays and Thursdays, and then they have Friday night services and Saturday morning services. So there are today a population, certainly in La Paz, of 500. Yep, 500 Jews. Those are mostly in La Paz, but are scattered also in those other larger cities as well. So I know you probably know this, but in case there's somebody who doesn't, so why is the minyan only on Monday and Thursday? Market days in ancient Israel, and that's the day that during the week, those are the 2 days during the week that we read the Torah, right? Just in case there are some people who, I don't want to assume that everybody knows everything. And so you recall that in ancient Israel, Mondays and Thursdays were the market days. Mondays to prepare for the early week, Thursdays to prepare for Shabbos. And so that's where we found the highest concentration of people at any given time. And so what someone would do is they would read the Torah aloud. What we think happened anyway, is that they would read the Torah aloud while the people were doing their marketing, and the people would listen to the stories of the Torah. Now, that's one reason why you see so many repetitions in the Torah. And so-and-so, son of so-and-so. And so-and-so, son of so-and-so. And you say, we just read that, son of so-and-so. Well, if you're walking around and you're hearing names, it's a good reference for you. Oh, that's right. Yeah, son of so-and-so. Okay, I got it. And so the Torah repeats itself over and over and over again so that the people who are getting this information orally, A-U-R, orally, will be able to process it and remember who's who. Who are these people again? Because there's so many people. So they always go into the relations. Okay. Zisu, you had a question?
Trivial point, but it turns out that in the early part of the 20th century, around the 1920s or around that, there was a rumor in Eastern Europe.
There was a what? Rumor, okay.
That if you spend, it was not true, but this is what the popular believe, if you spend 6 months in Cuba, you could go to the United States. So a lot of people, a lot of Jews who wound up in Cuba were just strange, except that they were stuck. There was no such a thing, no such a law, and that gave rise to two things. A lot of merchants, Jewish merchants of business and, blah, blah, and I'm here because of that. Or there was also a subculture of some enterprising young men who did not care for the law, who made a good money smuggling Jews into the United States. They got a boat and isolated coast, and some were very enterprising. They did not risk their lives, so they just took the
So Cecil says that in the 1920s there was a rumor floating around the island of Cuba that people could make their way to the United States successfully. And so that resulted in many Jews coming to Cuba to try to gain access to the United States. However, Cecil says the rumor was just a rumor and it wasn't true. And that led to some Jews being sort of enterprising, yes. And also some who trying to smuggle people in, and some of them did, some of them tried to smuggle in, some of them just tried to make a buck off of them and would bring them halfway and then drop them off or bring them back to Cuba. So today, Bolivia actually is kind of a popular tourist destination for Israelis. I'm not exactly sure why that would be. Perhaps because of the very early Sephardic influences. I don't know. But in researching, Bolivia turns out to be a popular tourist destination for Israeli tourists. Yeah.
Relatives in Israel who were talking about possibly going to visit Bolivia.
Did they say why?
Price,
Oh, okay.
It's not a popular destination for Americans at all. Almost no tourists take Bolivia at all.
Do you know why? So Gary says it's not a popular tourist destination for Americans.
It's very high in elevation because
Oh,
to be honest,
that could be.
with the older crowd.
That could very well be. Rosa says it's very high in elevation, so the air is much thinner, so it's harder to breathe, and that could be a very big problem for older people, I think, who make up most of the travel industry. Yeah. Cecil.
Trivial point that it seems to be nowadays that Turkey is a very popular place for Israelis to go on vacation to. And I was wondering if it has anything to do with the fact that so many Jews lived in Turkey and then went out of Turkey to other places and they went to Israel as well. I wonder if that's the attraction why the Israeli tourists go to Turkey.
So Cecil says Turkey is now a very popular tourist attraction for Israelis. I didn't know that, and I wouldn't have expected that to be.
there's a lot of archaeological history, and many Israelis are into that, and it's also easy to get.
So Joette says there's a very large, rich archaeological history in Turkey, and a number of Israelis are interested in that, and also it's very close. You don't have to go very far if you are living in Israel to get to Turkey. It's just right there.
2-hour flight.
2-hour flight?
We were in Turkey this past summer, in Istanbul and then Ephesus. And we visited the synagogue in Istanbul, and they have a little museum there, which was pretty well put together. So it's interesting, we were talking to the woman in the gift shop, and she said, well, I wouldn't go around wearing a Mogen David in Istanbul.
Yeah. She said not to wear the Star of David when you're on vacation in Istanbul. What surprises me, it doesn't surprise me until fairly recently that Turkey would have been a place that some Israelis might want to go because it was a secular government. However, it has become more and more and more and more mainstream Muslim. And I find it difficult to believe that Israelis might be comfortable going to a country that is now very strongly Muslim.
It's not that it's Muslim, it's that the leader of the country is becoming a dictator.
Well, he's also associated with the
Yes, but he's definitely moving the country more towards
Right, but
a religious country.
Visit a lot of Muslim countries. The question is only, what is that country's attitude towards Israel?
Right, and that was my thought, that, why would Turkey, perhaps because they had been secular and they understand the value of tourism and how much money it brings in, that they would say, okay, we'll let any tourists in.
Erdogan, who's the strong man in Turkey, he's a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. However, politics makes strange bedfellows, and Erdogan nowadays is warming up a little towards Israel because Iran.
Because of Iran, right. Okay, so what Zisel says is that Erdogan, who's the president? Yeah, president. He's the, I'm just trying to figure out what, it's a president, I think, of Turkey. Is warming up to Israeli tourism possibly because the Muslim world is aligning for the most part against Iran. And so it's sort of like the enemy of the enemy is my friend. And so yeah, that's a good point. All right, everybody. Wonderful. So we got through Barbados and Bolivia, and we'll continue with, maybe Brazil next time. Yeah, that'll be a big one. All right. Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
And we made a minion.
Yay!
Oh, by the way, Rabbi, Happy New Year.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I talked to everyone on, the New Year's Eve, our service, New Year's Eve, about, the idea that we celebrate the New Year. Clearly we do. And the comment that always goes, well, but it's not the Jewish New Year, so I'm like, look, I think really it depends on how you define yourself. If I asked you, are you an American Jew or are you a Jewish American? The answer tells me a great deal about how you prioritize things in the world. Neither one is right or better. But I think non-traditional Jews will identify, I am a Jewish American. I am the subgroup of Jews who live and identify in the larger group of Americans. And that's great. However, I think if you ask members of the Hasidim, they would probably identify as an American Jew. They are a subgroup, people who live in America, who identify themselves as a Jewish person. And that plays a large part in how we think. And so I went on to talk about, how are the ways that we think like Americans, but we could be thinking in a little more Jewish vein. And I talked a lot about, so for instance, ways to think a little bit more Jewishly. If we look at, for instance, our charitable giving, we work at we give to various charities over the year, but maybe the first thing in our mind is not, oh, I'm giving this for a Jewish reason. So for instance, we give to homeless shelters, let's say, because we have a soft spot for homeless people. Why? In our tradition, God says, take care of the orphan, the widow, and the stranger among you, meaning the three most marginalized people of the ancient world. But in our time, the homeless are terribly marginalized. They didn't apparently have homeless in biblical times. So for us, that's one of the marginalized groups, big time. And so what does God say? Take care of the marginalized group. So if you give to the homeless, it's not just an American thing. It's a Jewish thing. Absolutely, it's a and we just went on. We had a good conversation. But. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Stay as dry as you can.
Not tomorrow.
All right. Break time. Is it coming? What?
They're not married.
Where's your keeper? Oh, I don't have one.
She's Jewish, I know.
You could probably go to the Deaver Chapel and get one.
Stay with my.
He didn't give me on the spot.
Do we have a smaller, is there a smaller group today?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, there's more people
But we have a lot of people
online.
online.
Okay.
Peter will be here.
That's,
He's here. He's coming, yes, for this. Wow, I told you, because if he, tomorrow I can't go have 2 cars now? Yeah, now I have 2 cars.
Oh, you got your car back.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, yeah, I have to call, my car has to go to a different body shop. I could have sworn I put the date in my calendar, I can't find it.
Oh, it rains really hard. My umbrella would be just delicious.
Oh my goodness. Run.
January 10th is my global interview. Global interview.
Where do you have to go?
La Cienega in town?
But not to the airport.
No. It's 1099 South La Cienega.
Is that a TSA office?
Maybe.
Hi, Peter.
Probably. Well, she might be a little damp because we have an umbrella here.
Let's sit on the end.
It's better if it's sitting there because then you're not rubbing your shoulders against it. I mean, it'll be cozy, but. Sweaters, yeah, people are online. Not as many people are.
No, Susie even encouraged people.
Yeah, it's better for.
Said, you know, because of the weather, some of you might want to just zoom in.
Yeah.
Daniel Zissel?
Thank you, Carol.
Keep the distance between you and lies. one for you and one for your wife. Oh, she doesn't sit next to you. Here. Okay. So, hello to everyone. Happy New Year. So this is the first time I printed enough copies, but then everyone's watching on Zoom. And then I messed up the sharing. So Deborah, I think, resolved it. So now you should be able, there was a, right. So if you're watching on Zoom and you're frustrated because you can't find the source sheet, it's in the second email. Okay, so that's where, okay, so we're going to begin. There's this fabulous Talmudic story. Everything okay over there? There's this fabulous Talmudic story which deals with several themes. The themes that I want to think about are how things are often not what they appear. That's one theme of this sugya. Another theme, oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Another theme of this sugya is, who do you think goes to heaven? Who do you think goes to heaven? And that is, and some people are pointing at themselves. So those are some of the questions that I want to look at as we engage this text. So I'll read the text and then we can discuss for a few minutes and we'll see where we end up, okay? So we're in the middle of this section, the Gemara. What comes immediately before this is another story that does mention the marketplace. So I think that's maybe what the through line is. It's like, speaking of marketplaces, and now this is a story that occurred in the marketplace. What kind of place do you think a marketplace, a shuk, was back in the day? Now you go to Israel, you go to, the Carmel Shuk or Machane Yehuda, it's like, it's a lot of tourists or it's people who are buying spices and stuff. But back in the day, you bought everything there. And it also had like a little bit of an edge to it. There was some like shenanigans going on in the shuk. So sexuality was explored in the shuk. Because if you bought everything, and sexuality. So it wasn't like the place for like nice. It was a little bit of an edgy place. So I want you to keep that in mind. And then what I want you to also keep in mind is that that this is a story that occurs in Babylon. Is that the place that it occurs is kind of like not a place, Be'lefet, or Be'lefat, as it say here in the Hebrew, is not like I think it's either the northern province or the southern province, I don't remember what province, but it basically was the summer like capital of the government. And it was kind of like a, South Beach kind of feel to it. Okay? Yes, Joette.
So if this was in Babylon, does that mean the market was mixed Jewish and non-Jewish?
Yes. Thank you. The marketplace, that's an important thing that you'll see very quickly. Jews and non-Jews are in this marketplace. But in those days, how would you know if there was someone who was Jewish? Well, if a Jewish male would be indicated if they were, it's actually interesting, not a kippah, because a kippah is a relatively late innovation. You actually don't have to halachically wear a kippah. It's more of a custom, but tzitzit. And in those days, techelet on the tzitzit. Because sometimes other
other ethnicities had fringes on their garments, but you would certainly, like if a toga kind of thing, but you would certainly expect a Jewish person to have tzitzit with their, that had techelet, the blue thread. Okay, and that comes into play. But not only that, Jews and non-Jews had other ways of dressing in different ways. Mainly that from what I saw, the black shoes, like sandals that had black straps, were goyish. We're not Jewish. But white strap sandals, that was like, like a good deli sandwich, with mustard. Like if you ever, my dad told me I can't order, when I was a kid, you can't order a hot dog with ketchup. Jews eat it with mustard, he'd say. So black straps on the sandals, that was like mayonnaise and white bread, right? It was not for Jews, but white strap sandals, that was Jewish sandals. Keep that in mind. Okay. The Gemara relates another story about the righteousness of common people. Rabbi Brocha was often found in the market of Beit Lefet. So again, that's this like summer, it's the market, so it's edgy. It's like the summer province of the government, so it's got a little party feel, like South Beach. And Elijah the prophet would often appear to him. It's pretty common rabbinic literature for Elijah, Eliyahu Hanavi, to rear his head. And Elijah, because Elijah in the Bible it's not explicitly stated that Elijah dies. So Elijah comes in the Talmud a lot as kind of like a set the rabbis on the right path. And so Elijah acts as like this go-between, this emissary between the heavens and the earth. And when people have like little questions, Elijah sort of gives them a nudge in the Talmud. So Elijah is like this mystical figure, and he's a go-between. In the Bible, he's just like a regular prophet, but in the Talmudic literature, he picks up this sort of edge as being this emissary between the heavens and the earth and kind of steering the ship in the right direction. So Rabbi Brocha was found in the marketplace, and Elijah would often appear to him. Once, Rabbi Brocha said to Elijah, they're taking a stroll down the marketplace. They bought some nice Tupperware and spices. And Rabbi Brocha says to Elijah, of all the people who come here, is there anyone in this market worthy of the world to come? In other words, is there anyone in this marketplace that is worth heaven? Now again, there are Jews and non-Jews, but it's the summer province of the government, and it's a party place, and it's a market. So what do you think your regular answer, what do you think your, what answer does the text kind of like suggesting you should go to? No way. This is a rough or dirty or kind of like, this isn't like a wholesome environment. He said to him, so Elijah responds, no. No, these are all losers here. They're all, Okay. In the meantime, Rabbi Brocha saw a man who was wearing black shoes and who did not place the techelet on his garment. So what do you think who this person is? Not Jewish, you'd think. Elijah said to Rabbi Brocha, that man is worthy of the world to come. So the non-Jew, or seeming person who's not identifiable as Jewish, seems to be the person in this unlikely place who's designated for heaven. Rabbi Brocha ran after the man. Now, it's interesting. Why didn't Elijah just tell him, like, hey, this is why? But Elijah doesn't. Elijah then disappears, right? So Rabbi Barucha wants to know, what gets you into heaven? And I call this Stairway to Heaven, a little Led Zeppelin reference for all of you, right? For jailers and jesters. We'll get to that in just a second. So Rabbi Barucha wants to run after the man, wants to know, like, what's the ticket? I mean, after all, you're a black-souled, non-techelet person. You don't have fringes on your tzitzit. You're wearing the Goyish shoes. Oi, like what's going on with this guy? World to come? So Rabbi Barucha says to him, what is your occupation? The man said to him, go away, but come back tomorrow. He doesn't even give him the time of day. The next day, Rabbi Barucha came back and said to him, what is your occupation? The man said to him, I am a prison guard. And, we're on page 2 now, I imprison the men separately and the women separately. So, like, I'm the Shomer Nagia police. I make sure that the men and the women stay apart in the jail. And that's actually, if you think about it, a serious job. I mean, we know about sexual exploitation in prisons, and we know that it's a rough and tumble place. So he's a prison guard, and his job is to prevent men and to prevent sexual rape and the like, sexual abuses in the prison. And I place my bed between them so that they will not come to transgression. So he puts the boys on one side, the girls on the other side, and he sleeps in the middle. When I see a Jewish woman whom upon the Gentiles have set their eyes, I risk my life to save her. Wow. So this guy, when he sees, and we don't know who we just know that Elijah designated him as a heaven recipient. So he prevents a Jewish woman from being violated. Not only that, one day he goes on, this man's telling about his job, this heaven goer is going to say, one day there was a betrothed young woman among us. Meaning, you know how in Jewish weddings there's actually 2 ceremonies in a Jewish wedding? There's Erusin and Nisuin. Erusin is like the actual official betrothal or engagement. Then you read the chuppah, the rabbi says nice words, and then you make the sheva brachot, and then you stamp on the glass. In the olden days, back then, they used to do the 2 ceremonies on 2 different days. The betrothal ceremony would be on a different day than the sheva brachot. So, and months apart. So a woman would be betrothed to a man. And what did that mean? Well, they had, she or he were not allowed to have relations with anyone else, but neither were they permitted yet to have relations with one another. So they weren't fully married, but they weren't supposed to, they're dedicated to one another. That's the distinction. So they're officially engaged. So one day, this prison guard who's going to heaven, according to Elijah, is talking to Rabbi Baruch, and he says, one day there was a betrothed young woman among us, upon whom the Gentiles had set their eyes. So he's fearful for her because he feels that she's going to be sexually violated. I took dregs of red wine and threw them on the lower part of her dress. And I said, she is menstruating, so that they would leave her alone. Rabbi Baruch said to him, what is the reason that you do not? So this seems like a virtuous guy. I mean, he's a prison guard and he sees a non-Jew, a Jewish girl, and he saves her virtue. And there was even this one time when things were really getting out of hand, he thought quickly and wasn't going to be able to overcome the Gentiles in terms of physical. So he made it seem something else. He made it seem like she was menstruating, so they would leave her alone. Someone's phone. just check your phone. Someone's phone's off. Okay. So Rabbi Brocha said to him, so Rabbi Brocha listens to this guy and says, what is the reason that you do not have tzitzit? And why do you wear the black shoes? He's like, okay, look, you seem like a nice guy. If you've taken such an interest in these preserving the integrity of these Jewish women, you're Jewish, so why aren't you wearing tzitzit? And why do you wear the non-Jew shoes? The man said to him, since I come and go among Gentiles, I dress this way so they will not know that I am a Jew. So he's also not what it appears. He appears as a guy in the licentious licentious market, but he's really a sort of spy for the Jews. So this way, they will not know that I am a Jew. When they issue a decree, a gezerah, that means like anti-Semitism is on the right. The government decrees it's an anti-Semitic decree, like the Nuremberg laws or whatever. I inform the sages, and they pray for mercy and annul the decree. So I get like insider information, he says, on what's going on. And when I hear that a decree is coming down the pike, I go and tell the rabbis, they daven, and from their davening, God makes the government, annul the decree. And so I am an insider for the Jews. Rabbi Baruch further inquired, and what is the reason when I said to you, what is your occupation? You said to me, go away, not now, but come tomorrow. That would seem, again, appearances, like it's a blow-off. So Rabbi Baruch is like, you dress like, I know you're going to heaven, but you don't seem like you look like you're going to heaven. You dress like, what you dress like is not, the appearance is different than what it is. Why'd you blow me off yesterday? And he says, no. It only appears that I blew you off yesterday. The man said to him, at that moment, they, the non-Jews, had just issued a decree. And I said to myself, first I must go and inform the sages so that they will pray for mercy over this matter. In other words, it wasn't that I was blowing you off. I wasn't blowing off the rabbis. I actually had to go talk to all of the rabbis. You're one rabbi, but I had to go talk to the really important rabbis and let them know to start davening because there was anti-Semitic decrees that were around the corner. Again, things are not like they appear. In the meantime, I'm at the bottom of page 2. In the meantime, two brothers came to the marketplace. Elijah said to Rabbi Baruch, these two also have a share in the world to come. Rabbi Baruch went over to the men and said to them, what is your occupation? They said to him, we are jesters and we cheer up the depressed. Alternatively, when we see two people who have a quarrel between them, we strive to make peace. And that's how the story ends. Reactions to this story. According to this story, who goes to heaven? Peacemakers, people with good deeds. People who protect Jewish people. It's interesting. It's not a text about studying. It's not a text about, look, the rabbis who are trying to self-promote Judaism and the study of Talmud doesn't mention anything about that. Doesn't mention anything about Shabbat, putting on tefillin, keeping kosher. Who goes to heaven? This guy who infiltrates the non-Jewish community and protects Jewish girls. He's going to heaven. And then peacemakers, people who, not only peacemakers, they're peacemakers, but they make people smile. It's not what you would think should be the answer. You'd think would be the answer. Who goes to heaven? Elijah comes down and says, learn the Gemara. Then you go to heaven. Go to shul. keep Shabbat. Nothing. Someone, Nadia, and then Peter. That's, oh, good. Right. So in some way, someone who is exploited or potentially can be exploited or is vulnerable, with the jester is vulnerable because of their sadness or vulnerable because of the relationship that's fallen, and with the women in jail, vulnerable for the sexual, exploits for sexual assault. Yeah, people who will protect the weak.
It seems funny to me that he's asking them what their occupation is. It seems to me that if going to heaven shouldn't be necessarily dependent on what we do for a living.
That's an excellent point. Like, why would Elijah comes to you and says, that guy's going to heaven, I wouldn't go over to them and say, what's your occupation? I'd say, like, tell me about your soul or something like that. It's a good, so maybe he's trying just to get to know them, right? He's trying to get to know them, and, it's sort of like a common question when you go, oh, what do you do for a living? It's like it's an introductory kind of question. You're right. It seems like if you had like 1 second with someone who you knew was going to heaven, I wouldn't say, like, what do you do for a living? I'd be more inclined to say, like, what's the secret sauce, right? It happens that their occupations are what ultimately does distinguish them. But like Hillel was a day laborer. So if, like, let's say this text was written about Hillel, and Rabbi Baruch saw Hillel, and he'd say, what do you do? Oh, well, I stand outside of Home Depot every day hoping to get a job. It's what he did on the side that really mattered. Peter, go ahead. And then Sissel.
I think you're right that asking somebody what's your occupation is kind of introductory to draw them out. But also, if you ask someone, what good deeds do you do, there's a long tradition of people not really knowing, like Moshe Shrai. If you ask them, and a lot involved.
Yeah, so Peter's saying there's a long history of people, like, if you were to ask the question, what's the secret to your soul, or like what good deeds do you do, people wouldn't be able to answer that question because of humility. And there's a long tradition of people not. So that's a good point too. I think it's just to be read as like, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm trying to get to know you. Elijah just told me you're going to heaven. I want to try and start understanding this. And then the first question you asked is revealed to them. I don't think it shows that. I don't think the text is intending that occupation distinguishes the soul. I do think the text is trying to tell you that you find good in unlikely places. Yeah, sure.
Also, I think that this shows the focus on actions and not intentions. That the rabbis were basically behaviorists. You have to do what we're called upon, and not think about it and have good intentions. And that's what they're getting at. It's kind of related to their occupation, but what is it that they do, and not just observe the minutia of observance that kind of saturates Talmud.
Right. So Peter's point is right. Like, this is sort of a Talmudic piece that you wouldn't necessarily expect. You may think that it would have some minutia about observance. And then for sure the rabbis care what you do, but they saw even doing Shabbat or doing kashrut as observance, not just thinking. For the Judaism, and this is important, I think I've talked about it here, but for sure in other forums, Judaism, unlike other religions, like I'll take, Christianity and Islam, which are predicated on declarations of faith, Judaism is not. Judaism is predicated on doing. So, there's what to be said about both, but Judaism is clearly, you are Jewish. You don't have to declare anything to be Jewish. You just are. You know, if you never said the Shema again, that doesn't mean you're not Jewish. People have a hard time understanding that in the contemporary world, or they try, and I try and let them know that Judaism is not just a religion. I think that diminishes us, but we are also, anti-Zionists use that. You know, oh, they're just a religion. What religion should get its own country? No, you're misunderstanding. We are a people that has a religion. But doing is what does distinguish our religion is an emphasis on the doing, which is different. Now, Zissel, you had something you were patient.
I think occupation is a terribly superficial way of assessing an individual. It's not the occupation, but what the individual does, what the individual acts, the thoughts and teachings of that person. That's valuable, not the occupation.
Right. And even, so Zissel says the occupation is not valuable. Again, I do think this is just like, hey, tell me what you do for a living. It's like a first date kind of, it's just like get to know you question. But even their occupations are not like what you would think would get you to heaven if done in the traditional way. Like a jailer, a guard, you would think like a guard is sort of like a reluctant, sometimes on the take, you know. But this was a guard who went out of his way to prevent sexual assault and tried to preserve the intent. Like he even said, like, I put my life on the line to protect the virtue of these women. And quick thinkers too, which is not often associated with, you know, like a prison guard. Like all of a sudden he realizes I don't have the physical strength to outdo these guys. They're going to rape her. Quickly takes wine and throws it on her dress. I mean, that's like, that's on your feet thinking. And so it defies like the conception of what the appearance is different than the reality of who this person is. And the same thing with jesters. Often, you know, people think jesters are not serious individuals. They're just jokers. They're just back of the class, you know. But he says, no. I mean, they say we are jesters. We cheer up the depressed. It's not that we're just making, like, our job is not just making laughs at the world, but it's like it serves a purpose to bring a smile when there is sadness. That's a very interesting way of looking at the profession in a way that you wouldn't normally think to look at it. Again, the appearance is different than the reality. Joette.
So I have a question about the jesters, because he said, what is your occupation? And they say we are jesters. But is that something, and from the things that they describe that they do, it doesn't seem that they're getting paid for that. So how is that their occupation?
Then the first part is we are jesters, we cheer up the depressed. I mean, it doesn't say more. I think that you can read like that's our paid gig. Like, you know, we go, you know, we do birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, sweet 16s, you know, we're on the circuit. And the second part is, by the way, but when we see people who have a quarrel, there are people, and we all know them, there are people who just are able to light up a room. Right? And even in a room that's filled with acrimony, they can bring light. And it seems like they go around, and this is like their side hustle, but they're probably not getting paid for this, where they're just adding, they see acrimony and they bring goodness. So, any other thoughts? Yeah.
It was a profession, and it's still considered a great mitzvah to entertain people at a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see that people juggle and do all sorts of things like that. In some instances,
Sure. To be misameh chatan v'kala.
and a bunch of some of the Hasidic rabbis had court jesters.
Right.
There's the famous one, Herschel, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, because that rabbi was especially depressed.
Right. Yeah, the Hasidic rabbis especially were known for, it was a tough gig. Go ahead.
I believe that the justice, and
Nadia makes a good point. Nadia said that in our religion, there's an ideal of of enjoying and being happy, enjoying the world, and these people help facilitate that. So that's a good thing. What you mentioned actually, I think this is a polemic. This is an anti early Christianity polemic, the insertion of the jesters, for sure. Because especially in early Christian writings, it's very austere, very, laughing, smiles, enjoyment were all seen as sinful. And this text is saying, no, just the opposite. So this text is for sure the insertion of jesters, of people who make you laugh, as heaven worthy, is for sure a jab at Christianity. For sure.
I just wonder why there's so many Jewish comedians.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a takeoff on this.
Yeah. And also that Rosalie was mentioning that there's a lot. She wonders why all the Jewish comedians and is this a takeoff from here? I also point that jesters, comedians are. Sometimes critiqued as being not serious, or the perception, but often they have such a sharp understanding of what's going on in the world, and they're able to boil it down to a very simple, in such a way that they are like the sharpest person in the room, and that the court jester for a king was often also consulted. Like, they weren't just the idiot. But they often had sort of an acute understanding of what was going on, because we laugh at things that are true, right? Okay, good. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Gary.
I think that what determines whether you're going to be going on the road to heaven is not your occupation, but the quality of your life and the actions you take while you're alive.
Yeah. So Gary just mentioned that it's the qualities that you take, not your occupation, that distinguishes you. And I think that's what the text is saying. It's like, I think this text is saying, look for, in unlikely places, this market in the bad part of town, there are people who are heaven worthy. And they don't look like it. And you wouldn't think that they would be, but they are. It's like there's a kaf zchut, which is judge everyone favorably, is what's mentioned in Pirkei Avot. And this is sort of like a Talmudic exposition on that. There's this wait a second, we tend to assume things about people, the way they dress, what they do. So there's a lot of assumptions, and basically every single assumption is off in this sugya, in this piece of Talmud. The guy is dressed in one. So the market's not the place to find the heavenly people, and yet there are people who belong to heaven. The first guy is the jailer. He's dressed like a non-Jew, but he's Jewish. Why? And he's super Jew. He's super virtuous, saving poor maidens. So he's super Jew. And you didn't think he was Jewish, but he's super Jew. And he's even he's like a spy for the Jewish people. He's Eli Cohen gone rogue, and and so he's super Jew. And then you have these jesters, but they are virtuous. And by the way, what's also interesting is that usually in these texts, people come to the rabbis and ask the rabbis the questions, and then the rabbis do the talking. In this text, it's just the opposite. The rabbis have none of the answers, and they're asking all of the questions, and it's the jailers and the jesters who are imparting the wisdom. The rabbi doesn't know anything. And even you can imagine he's like being a little bit of a wise guy when he says to Elijah, tell me, is there anyone here who goes to heaven? Like, look at this place. What a dump. You know, we're in the wrong part of town. This place is awful. And Elijah goes, no, actually, that guy. And then he runs over, and the rabbi doesn't know anything. The rabbi has to ask questions, and every assumption that the rabbi made is wrong. From what he was wearing to what he was doing to why he got blown off on that first day, all of it was wrong. The rabbi's wrong every single time. And who's the one who are teaching? The jailer and the jesters. Those are the ones who are teaching the Torah of how to get to heaven. Perhaps the most important Torah of all. Right. And I think it's a beautiful story, I think. Because it forces us to think about, you know, assumptions that we make, sources of wisdom, and like who do we have the right to judge people? Yes, sir. Zissel.
It's another example of the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover.
That's right. Yes.
You can find a nugget of gold in the deepest swamp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So right. So Zissel is reminding us that it's a don't judge a book by its cover story, and that you can find gold in a swamp. Absolutely. But also it forces us. It's not only the rabbi who looks. You know, the reader, the text. What's interesting about the text is that the text it allows the reader to imagine, especially with the jailer. It doesn't blow the line. It doesn't, you know, we don't have any insider information. So we're learning about this guy at the same time as the rabbi's learning about him. So we're making all the same assumptions as the reader about who this guy is. You know, like a black sandaled, non-tzitzit wearing, market attending jailer. Oy vey. So we were like, you know, we don't want our, you know, daughters bringing this guy home. No, he's a virtuous spy for the Jewish people who's the rabbi's informant and telling them when there are hard gezeras that are being passed, and also defending the virtue of the Jewish girls by putting himself in harm's way. I mean, the reality is very different than the perception. Okay, any points? Yeah. Yeah. The point made was that there's different ways of learning this. That it's just not becoming a rabbi, but you can, right? And you know, the jester probably has like the street knowledge. But I think someone said it. It's sort of like common goodness is what gets you into. I mean, if you think about it, like it's just an interesting story to tell. Like this is the story that they preserved in the text. How do you get to heaven? This is the way. Yeah, but the quality of your life in a specific manner, helping other people, right? It's not just you know, it's not just about yourself. It's not the person who stays. If you think about it, what's interesting about the jester and the jailer is that they both go out of their way to engage in what's really not their business. They don't mind their own business. They mind other people's business and they help. Joette.
So this reminds me of a story that highlights the difference between Judaism and Christianity, because I remember there was one time when I was on one of the Air Force bases we were at, and I was doing volunteer work there, and there was another woman who was also doing volunteer work there, and she was not Jewish, and she said to me, "You are such a nice person
Right. So Joette was retelling this story that she met a specific type of Christian while she was volunteering on an Air Force base when she was when her family was in the service, and that the woman said to her, "You're a really nice person. It's unfortunate that you're going to hell." But again, that is what you believe, right? That type of Christianity is all predicated on your belief. So it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because my Christian colleagues would get upset at that. But at the end of the day, like, if you believe in Jesus, the last minute, you're good, you're saved. And Judaism would be like, well, what did you do for the rest of your life? That wasn't so good. You know, it's all about deed. And what's also interesting about that story, Joette, is that it wasn't what it appeared to that woman. So in some ways, it fits into this thing. Like, she wouldn't think of you. Like, we can add Joette's encounter as like the third part. The woman wouldn't think that a Jewish lady would be a source of goodness, because she doesn't believe in the J guy, you know, Jesus. So, but, you know, she's like Rabbi Brocha, who sees all of a sudden, you know, preconceived notions are you know, are tossed aside.
You know, since Joy brought that up, I had a friend who, when I first met her, was in marketing, and then she decided to become a minister. She was Presbyterian, and we would go skiing and do other things together. And you know, while we're driving, we have these long conversations. And I said, so we were having a conversation about religion, and I said, so you think that if you don't believe a certain way, that if you're not Christian, then you're not going to heaven? And to me, it was such a weird concept, you know.
Not all Christians, by the way, would say that. I just want to be very clear. She didn't.
She did.
Oh, she did.
She believed that.
Right. So not all Christians would say, you know, there's parts in the New Testament, there's parts of the Torah that we don't look at, right? I mean, turn a blind eye towards. So there are Christians who wish not to engage that part of the New Testament, which is, you know, I forgot where it is, but, you know, the idea that, you know, faith is the only salvation, essentially. But there are a fair number of Christians who do believe that, and that it often is challenging to them when they meet Jews. I mean, we just have it's a different worldview, you know, one predicated on belief and one predicated on action. Okay, yeah.
I don't know if it's a big test for the Talmud, but are there various places where they talk about whether or not you'll go to heaven?
Yeah, this is not the only place. This is one of the most popular stories about who goes to heaven. But no, they talk about how Olam Haba in different places. Yeah. And it's not a saintly, like, entrance. You know, like, you're not, like, in other places in the mission, like, it's not like the bar is kind of set low, which is nice, you know. Woof. Everyone breathe a sigh of relief, and, you know. Peter.
I have a question about that. I had the impression that certainly the rabbis discouraged focusing on the world to come because they saw what happened
Yeah.
to people who focused on that, but that they had to satisfy a need from the people to believe in that.
I mean, who could blame him? So Peter's point is what's essentially the question is, why this emphasis on the world to come? I mean, first of all, it's a question that a lot of, like, we are, you know, kids get, like, preoccupied with that too. And I think it's natural. And I think also because the rabbis dispense with the notion, which is very present in the Bible, that your actions lead to reward in these days, right? In the Bible, it's replete with examples of do this and it'll lengthen your days. You know, believe and it'll rain. You know, all those kinds of examples are filling the Bible. Philosophically, the rabbis make a break from that and say, no. Like, we've lived life too long, and frankly, we've experienced too much oppression to really believe that you're good, you get good here. So then the rabbis are in a theological pickle, which they address by stating, hey, there's the world to come. But I think that provides an oppressed people with some hope also, right? What's that? Yeah, Christianity was much better with this. Yeah, Christianity said, hey, you could be poor and starving and whatever. Jesus loves you. Accept Jesus, you're good. And you're right. I mean, that's why religion, especially religion that has like a roadmap to heaven, is very compelling for people who don't have a lot. Because when you don't have a lot and you can, oh, wait a second, but I can get this, and that is very compelling. I don't myself don't spend so much time thinking about the world to come. Maybe that's, I just, like, I am Jewish because I think Judaism adds to my life here. I'm not too much thinking about what the world to come and all of that. Maybe some of you are different. Okay, I'm going to end it here for the day. I just love this text again because of, first of all, the hard question of who goes to heaven and a very unexpected answer. But then unexpected answers or unexpected truths are uncovered throughout this text. Again, things are not often what they seemingly appear. So I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and stay dry. And
Can I just say that, I converted to Judaism when I married my husband, and before that we went to a deli. I never went to a deli like in my life, and I wanted white bread and mayo. Like, he was so shocked. I'm glad it wasn't a deal breaker.
can I make a confession? I kind of like ketchup on hot dogs too. No, I love mustard now, but as a kid, I'm like, can't I just have ketchup? That's right. Look, it's just interesting. It's like what, look, because we're all saying this, tongue in cheek when I say, oh, it's goyish. I hope everyone knows that I'm just joking. And maybe I should be more careful about that. But it's just funny because like with the Haredim in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox, they run around, oh, we're dressed like the real Jews. It's 18th century Polish aristocracy. It's not Jewish. So it's like, what is Jewish? Black sandals, not Jewish. Leather, like, come on, like it all changes. It's all fluid. So. Yeah, but it pushes it. This part of the Talmud pushes it and says, wait a second, so let's talk about heaven. That's what the Talmud does. It pushes the boundaries. Peter.
To follow up with what you said, so I heard from somebody that they were once standing in the Fairfax area with a chassid in the middle of summer, and he stopped and said, because the Baal Shem Tov wanted to look like a 19th century Polish nobleman, I have to stand here schwitzing.
Right, exactly. Right, yeah.
Imagine living in Israel and wearing.
Oh my God. This year when I was in the summer, I was in Jerusalem. In the morning, I'd walk to the Beit Midrash, and for the 10 days I was there, I saw this chassid who was riding his bike to work every morning. Like, we intersected at the same time, and just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like the strimal, the whole thing. It was 110 degrees out. I have a T-shirt on and I'm schwitzing, and but.
So when we lived in Spain, in order to get kosher meat, we went to the local Spanish kosher butcher. And when it came time for Thanksgiving, I asked for a turkey. And he looked at me and he said, only the goyim eat turkey.
Right.
It's just a perception of
That's right.
what the custom is in your area.
That's right. What is Jewish is defined by the Jews who are in the day, and then it changes. Yes, Zissel, last comment.
Just a little story. I found myself many years ago in Tel Aviv looking for the Tahana Merkazit, the bus stop. Back then, it wasn't a building back then. The Tahana Merkazit is a
Well,
company of several.
Yeah, now it's a dump, by the way, in Tel Aviv. It's a dump in Tel Aviv. It is a building, but it's a really bad building. Go ahead.
Well, I found myself there knowing that the boss I need is somewhere around here, but I did not know. All of a sudden, as I'm looking, this apparition from the 17th century comes in front of me with the payas and the beard and the long, the short.
Yeah.
The whole story. So I don't know Hebrew. I know this guy doesn't know English, but there's a common language. I know he knows Yiddish.
Right.
And so I know Yiddish. So I asked him in Yiddish, will you please tell me what the Tehana Merkazit is? Well, I'm dressed like I'm now. He's dressed like in the 17th century. His eyes became as big as saucers. He couldn't believe that this guy would talk Yiddish.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Unexpected. But you know what? And sometimes it happens. Like you meet people who surprise you because you assume one thing about them based on the way they look, and then the reality is different. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
So maybe I'll see you guys Shabbat.
Remember, it's not a requirement.
To see or to go to shul on Shabbat?
You know what? You'll still get to heaven. I think so.
Not me. But it's okay too.
I really don't believe in heaven, okay? But I do believe what I once heard, the way you live is the way you're going to be able to live. And that you're writing your own legacy as you live your life.
Correct. I agree with that.
And that's all I think about when I think about heaven. That's my heaven, okay?
I got no problem with that.
I got to run lots about it and study, but it's a matter of faith, like everything else.
Enjoy.
And that's not what where life is.
It's fun. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay.
You too, Rabbi. I do what I think is the right thing
you're being rewarded. You're, number one, by helping other people. Two, doing the right thing. And three, when we're no longer here, your legacy. Huh?
That's true. That's very true.
Well, we were playing with Sheila. In the summer, you were not.
Maybe the weekend, if I make it to school. If I don't make it to school,
Last night it was Judy, me,
my mother, I'd say,
Melanie, and me, and then Esther was out having another party. She got out.
I see things, you know, because
I know, did you see?
Spanish today.
I did.
As we know me as a kid.
That was one of the price fix menus for New Year's Eve.
Yeah, see you guys.
Well, she looks so beautiful, and Danny and his wife, Susan.
You know what?
She is. She's wonderful.
And so last night she was playing for her birthday. Anyway, we had.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
I remember some storms that were really, really, really bad.
I have trouble hearing myself. And people who watch from home.
Well, people sit back here, other than Joette, who has a very
And you
strong
have a nice
voice.
day too.
I can't even hear it. I'm in the same room.
All right, I'll have the microphone. I'll walk with you.
You're gonna be gone.
Yeah, I'm going to it. Yeah, I'm going to it.
I know, more handsome.
So, but next week, yeah, we'll try.
Whose green thing is that? I don't think I've ever.
Oh, Zizo, where is he? Well, could you catch up with him?
He always forgets.
Frank, give it to me.
I'm sorry, Cecil left his coat, so I'm gonna try to catch up with him.
Unless he's over here, did he go to the restroom?
I don't know.
Let me find out.
I don't know.
I don't know, I didn't answer.
Okay, so maybe Gary will catch
Here,
you
we'll
up.
catch you.
Okay.
All right, are there enough people here, or?
Take some stuff home.
Oh, yeah, I am. You too.
All right, take care.
I banged up my foot, I think I told you that, so.
Do what?
I stubbed my toe.
Oh, no.
I
You
didn't
break it.
a week ago and it still hurts.
Maybe you should tape it. You might have broken it.
I know. I went to see the doctor next week.
I would tape it.
You know, that might be a good thing.
I know.
Oh, I told you it's the side of the foot that hurts. But anyway, take care.
Bye.
Bye. Well, you know what?
hit the streaming and it doesn't stream, is that it?
There's no streaming. I mean, I don't see anything that says streaming.
Wait, when you click on what I sent you in the email, it doesn't
Right.
take, it doesn't
No,
take,
it takes me right to something that says, God, I can't remember what it says, but it says, it's not your fault, it's ours.
well, it's not ours.
Okay. But it could be mine, but that's the message that I get.
But everybody else seems to be able to do the streaming.
Huh.
I mean, I had other complaints about other things, like the first time the thing went out for Rabbi Schuldenfrei, it didn't work this morning. But, other people were definitely on streaming, they did talk to me.
Well, then they have something that I don't have, on my iPad, I guess, I don't know. Did other people go to temple?
You mean were people here?
Yeah.
There were 10 of us for the first class and 11 for the second.
Oh, that's good.
There you are.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get everything set up.
Oh, I'm eating my cottage cheese and fruit. There's nobody here besides me.
Okay, enjoy yourself. It's fine. I ate a little something, so I'm okay.
I have no idea who's going to join us. I know Rochelle said she would be late because she loves her class on trivia that she does through Valley Storefront.
Uh-huh.
Looks like it's still raining. Pretty hard.